Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that digs into the stories you think you know to find out what's really going on beneath the surface.
That's right.
And today we're doing a deep dive into someone truly iconic, Rosa Parks. Now you probably have an image, right? The tired seamstress on the bus.
That image is really powerful, very enduring. It's definitely part of her story.
But the sources you shared with us,
Yeah,
well, there's just so much more, a richer, much more complex story there.
absolutely. And that's our mission today, really, to unpack these sources and show you the lesser-known activism of Rosa Parks. Activism that started long before that bus incident and continued long after.
Yeah, it's about getting a fuller picture, a more, nuanced understanding of her, and importantly, the collective effort around her.
Exactly. It wasn't just one person.
Okay, so let's start with that standard story, the one we all kind of learn. Ordinary seamstress, exhausted, spontaneously refuses to give up her seat in the white section because she's just too tired.
Right. It's a neat narrative, easy to digest, but it really, really minimizes her actual role and, the whole movement she was already part of.
So what's the first big thing people get wrong about that specific day?
Well, it's fascinating how that simple story stuck. Okay, first, her age. People often think she was, elderly, maybe frail.
Yeah, I can see that image.
But actually, on December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks was 42. Middle-aged, definitely not elderly.
42, okay.
And the seat, this is a big one. She wasn't in the white section. She was sitting in the very first row of the section meant for black passengers.
Ah, okay, so the bus driver told her to move further back.
Precisely. When the white section filled up, the driver demanded that she and others in that row move back to make space for white passengers.
So she was already where she was supposed to be, according to the rules of the time. And her diaries, you mentioned those, they confirm it was spontaneous that day, not planned.
Yes, her private writings do suggest that the act itself on that day wasn't some prearranged protest orchestrated by the NAACP or anything. It wasn't like, okay, Rosa, today's the day.
But, and this is the crucial part, right?
Exactly. But it wasn't just some random act by someone who'd never thought about civil rights before. That's the key takeaway.
It's more like a breaking point.
A breaking point, absolutely. The culmination of years and years of quiet, consistent resistance. She was a lifelong activist, deeply committed.
And what a life. I mean, looking at her early years. Rosa Louise McCauley, born in Tuskegee, Alabama in 1913.
Yeah.
Straight into the Jim Crow era.
Right. Legal segregation, discrimination, and just this constant threat of racial violence. It was the air they breathed.
The sources mentioned her grandparents were former slaves. And that as a child, this really struck me. She guarded her home with her grandfather against the KKK with a shotgun.
Yes. Imagine that childhood. It definitely shapes you. Builds a certain kind of resilience, a certain kind of steeliness.
No kidding. Then at 19, she marries Raymond Parks, a barber, but also a charter member of the Montgomery NAACP.
And they shared that interest, that deep concern about racial politics. Rosa joined the NAACP herself in 1943.
So that's, 12 years before the bus boycott?
12 full years. She wasn't just a member either. She was the secretary for the Montgomery chapter, later the youth advisor. She was working on voter registration, investigating discrimination cases, violence.
And specifically, the sources say, protecting black men from false accusations, from lynchings, and seeking justice for black people, especially women, assaulted by white people.
Yes, and that wasn't just theoretical work for her. It was deeply personal.
The source mentioning her own experience in 1931, an attempted assault by a white neighbor, her quote is just powerful. I was ready to die, but give my consent never, never, never.
Chilling, isn't it? And it absolutely fueled her work. Which brings us to the Russie Taylor case in 1944.
Okay, tell us about that.
So, Parks travels to Abbeville, Alabama. She's there as an NAACP investigator. Russie Taylor was a young black woman, a 24-year-old sharecropper, walking home from church, abducted and brutally gang raped by 7 white men. They threatened to kill her if she told anyone.
But she did tell. She reported it to the sheriff.
She did. Incredibly brave. This sheriff found 2 of the men and then just let them go. No charges filed. Nothing.
Unbelievable.
Just left.
Yeah. So Parks gets involved. She launches the Committee for Equal Justice for the Rights of Mrs. Russie Taylor. By October 44, it's getting national attention.
Did it help? Did they get justice?
Sadly, no. A grand jury refused to indict the men. The suspect's lawyer actually tried to pay off Taylor's husband to keep quiet.
That's sickening.
Parks wrote directly to the governor demanding justice, but nothing happened. No charges ever brought. It took until 2011, almost 70 years later, for Alabama to formally apologize to Russie Taylor.
70 years. Yeah. For the state's morally abhorrent failure, as they put it. It just shows you the depth of injustice, and Parks was right there, fighting it decades before the bus.
Okay, so this paints a very different picture. The bus incident in 55, it wasn't out of nowhere. It was built on years of this kind of work, these kinds of grievances.
Exactly. And not just Parks's work, the Women's Political Council, led by Joanne Robinson, they'd been pushing the city about bus segregation for years.
Right, you mentioned they wrote to the mayor in 54 about seating, boarding, all that stuff, and the fact that 3/4 of the riders were black.
They were the majority of the customers, paying fares, yet treated horribly. It was a system just waiting to be challenged.
And Parks wasn't the first person arrested for resisting on the buses either, was she?
No, absolutely not. We really need to remember Claudette Colvin.
The teenager.
Yes, just 15 years old. Arrested in March 1955, months before Parks, for the exact same thing, refusing to give up her seat. Her quote was amazing. "History had me glued to the seat."
Wow. And there were others too.
Yes, the sources mention several other black women arrested for similar acts in those months leading up to December.
So if Colvin and others resisted first, why did Rosa Parks become the catalyst, the face of the boycott? Was it just chance?
Not really chance, no. It was more about strategic readiness. Claudette Colvin was incredibly brave, obviously, but the NAACP leadership, people like Edie Nixon, felt Parks's case was stronger strategically.
Stronger how?
Well, Parks was older, 42, as we said. She was well known and respected in the community, secretary of the NAACP. And crucially, she'd actually attended a workshop that summer in 1955 at the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee.
What kind of workshop?
It focused on nonviolent protest strategies. So she had training, she had the standing, the maturity. The leaders felt she was better equipped to be the public face to withstand the inevitable attacks, the harassment, the pressure.
That makes sense. It wasn't just about who did it first, but whose case offered the best chance to really launch something big and sustainable.
Precisely. It shows real strategic thinking behind the scenes.
Okay, so her arrest sparks the boycott. But the legal challenge, the case that actually overturned segregation on the buses, that was Browder v. Gale, right?
Correct. Filed in federal court on February 1st, 1956. It directly challenged Alabama's bus segregation laws.
And this is interesting. Parks wasn't actually a plaintiff in that case.
No, she wasn't. And that was a deliberate legal tactic by the NAACP lawyer, Fred Gray.
Why?
To avoid any claims, they were just trying to sidestep her existing criminal prosecution for disorderly conduct on the bus. They wanted a clean federal challenge to the segregation laws themselves.
So who are the plaintiffs?
Aurelia S. Browder, Susie McDonald, Claudette Colvin.
Ah, so Colvin was part of the legal case.
Yes, her and Mary Louise Smith, 4 women whose experiences formed the basis of the federal suit.
And that case was successful.
It was. On June 5th, 1956, a special 3-judge federal court panel ruled that bus segregation was unconstitutional. They cited Brown v. Board of Education, the school desegregation case, as the precedent.
And the Supreme Court agreed.
Yep. Supreme Court upheld that decision on November 13th, 1956. The actual order to integrate the buses reached Montgomery on December 17th.
Leading to the end of the boycott.
On December 20th, 1956, after 381 days, an incredible achievement.
381 days. Just think about the coordination, the sacrifice that took.
It's staggering, and it really highlights the collective effort, especially the women. We often focus on Parks and King, but the sources reveal this vast network of women who were the boycott's backbone.
The unsung heroes.
Yeah.
Like Joanne Robinson and the Women's Political Council.
Absolutely pivotal. Robinson and others literally stayed up all night mimeographing tens of thousands of flyers announcing the boycott after Parks' arrest. They got the word out immediately.
And people like Frances Belzer, the church secretary, handwriting flyers.
And the everyday boycotters, women like Carrie Folgate and Donnie Jones. Donnie walked almost 8 miles a day to her job in the fields. 8 miles.
Wow.
For over a year. And she described that first mass meeting as feeling like a revival starting. You get a sense of the energy, the determination.
What about getting around? How do people manage without buses for 381 days?
Community organization. People like Zico Z. Williams drove others 5 days a week in a carpool system. Kids walked. Jamila Jones was 11. She and her sister walked to school the whole time.
An 11-year-old.
Yeah. And she even started a singing group to raise money for the carpools, wrote a new verse for We Shall Overcome. It was everyone pitching in.
And Georgia Gilmore, the club from nowhere.
Yes. Georgia Gilmore, she was a cook. She organized women to cook and sell dinners, baked goods, raising money secretly, hence the name Club from Nowhere. to fund the carpool system, essential work.
Feeding the resistance, literally.
Exactly. And women like Idessa Williams-Redden, remembering Mahalia Jackson coming down to sing for the walk-in folks, boosting morale.
And the danger they faced. Coretta Scott King's home being bombed.
8 weeks in, and she refused to leave Montgomery. Gussie Nesbitt witnessed that bombing, saw Dr. King appeal for nonviolence even as community members arrived angry and armed.
It took incredible courage from everyone involved, including white allies like Virginia Durr.
Yes, Virginia Durr, who helped bail Parks out with E.D. Nixon. She was a longtime activist herself, worked with Eleanor Roosevelt against the poll tax. Her support and that of other white allies was important.
It's just such a complex, community-driven effort. Gwendolyn Patton's quote really sums it up. The bus boycott was not about sitting next to white people. It was about sitting anywhere you please.
That's it right there. Dignity. Self-determination.
So, after the boycott, after this monumental victory, what happened to Rosa Parks? Was she celebrated as a hero immediately?
Not exactly. The personal cost for her was incredibly high. She was jailed, obviously. She lost her job as a tailor's assistant. Her husband, Raymond, lost his job too, likely due to the pressure.
Just for her actions.
Yes. They faced constant threats and harassment. They ended up having to leave Montgomery and move to Detroit, seeking safety and work. And even there, she struggled financially for years, lived in poverty for a long time.
And the sources mentioned she was even, disencouraged from participating in later marches?
Yeah, that's a sad, complex part of the story. Some in the movement, perhaps unintentionally, sort of pigeonholed her into that one moment on the bus, maybe felt her time as the central figure had passed. History can be complicated that way.
But she didn't stop being an activist, did she?
Oh, absolutely not. Her activism was lifelong. It continued right up until her death in 2005 at age 92.
What did she do later on?
Well, she was there. She spoke at the Selma to Montgomery March in 65. She was at the March on Washington in 63. She got involved in anti-Vietnam War protests.
Still fighting for justice.
Always. And for many years, through the 70s and 80s, she worked in the Detroit office of Congressman John Conyers Jr., helping constituents, working within the system for change.
And she started a foundation.
Yes, the Rosa and Raymond Parks Institute for Self-Development. It created programs like taking young people on civil rights history tours across the South, teaching them about the movement, about other activists, making sure the whole story was told.
Passing the torch, ensuring the history wasn't forgotten or oversimplified.
Exactly. Her commitment never wavered.
So why then? Why did that simplified, tired seamstress narrative become so dominant? The sources touch on a few reasons.
Yeah, it seems to be a mix of things. Partly, it helped deflect criticism at the time that the movement was stirred up by outside agitators. Presenting Parks as an ordinary person spontaneously acting made it seem more organic, less threatening, maybe.
Makes sense.
Also, there's maybe just a human need to make sense of incredible bravery. Attributing it to simple weariness is easier than grappling with decades of deep political commitment and strategy.
And this idea of linguistic modesty.
Right. Activists themselves often downplay their own roles, focusing on the collective. Parks herself was known for being humble. That can inadvertently feed into a narrative that minimizes individual planning and emphasizes spontaneity. The focus shifts from planned resistance to just a moment.
So the simplification served multiple purposes, perhaps, even if it obscured the truth.
It seems that way. It created a powerful symbol, but one that lacked the depth and complexity of the real woman and the real movement.
Well, this deep dive has definitely painted a different picture. A Rosa Parks, who was resilient, strategic, deeply experienced, and whose act on the bus wasn't the start of her fight, but a pivotal moment within it.
A moment made possible by her own history and by that incredible community network, especially the women we talked about.
Understanding this true story, it really helps you appreciate how complex social change is, doesn't it? It's not usually one person or one moment. It's long, hard work by many.
It really is the long arc of justice, you know? And seeing the hidden contributions, particularly of women, it reminds you history's messy. The official story is often just the cleaned-up version.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to take away. If the story of someone as famous as Rosa Parks could become so simplified, so deeply entrenched in this sort of standard version, what other historical narratives might we be accepting too easily?
What other complex truth, what other hidden figures or collective efforts might be waiting just beneath the surface if we just dig a little deeper into the sources?
Something to think about.